All right, let's get started. Top of Kuf Yud Beis, Amud Aleph on the very top line. Yesterday, we spoke about a fascinating halachic discussion. If a child receives a Yerusha, the fact that he received the Yerusha, is that a full kinyan or is that not a full kinyan? Is that kilokeach? Let's say that I'm a lokech. I give you $5. You give me something in return, a lekicha. There's a shinui rishus, and I now owe. Is a yoresh like a lokeach, or is a yoresh not like a lokeach? So we saw this machlokes yesterday, and Rami Bar Chama, we will soon see his opinion come up. Rami Bar Chama was of the opinion that Rishus Yoresh is Kirshus Lokeach, that when a Yoresh inherits something, he really owns it. Full ownership, not quasi, not partial, not conceptual, full halachic ownership. And on that note, Rav Ada Bar Ava, Masni Lahad Rami Bar Chama, aha. Yesterday we saw Machlokes Rami Bar Chama and Rava about the topic of Yoresh, whether or not a Yoresh is Kilokeach. And he said it doesn't apply to our Mishnah at the beginning of this parak, but rather it applies to this brisa, which is on Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph on the second line. Hiniach lehen avi and maus shel ribis. Let's say that a father wasn't such a yasher businessman, at least not a from one, and he collected ribis, he collected interest, and that money, which was interest, was inherited downward to his son. So you have Yaakov and you have Yosef. So Yaakov did business incorrectly, and the money that came down to Yosef B'Yerusha was ribis. Even if the son knows that the money that he's holding is ribis, let's say the father was very organized, he has the bag that says principal, and then he has the bag that says interest. He's very masudar. And the kid is holding this bag knowing full well that it's usher to do so. Ladina, that child who got the ribis B'Yerusha does not have to return it to its rightful owner. Omar Rami Bar Chama, here we see the din of Rami Bar Chama that Zoso Meres, Rishus Yoresh Kirshus Lokeach Dami, that the interest that the child inherited was such a strong kinyan, a strong shinui rishus, that halacha l'maisa he fully owns it, and he does not need to give it back to the original owner from whom the interest was taken. That's Rami Bar Chama, who holds that Rishus Yoresh is Kirshus Lokeach. But Rava Amar no, La'olam Emalach Rishus Yoresh Lav Kirshus Lokeach Dami. You can't bring a raya from here about the power of Shinui Rishus as it relates to Yerusha. Why? Because V'shani Hacha, the case of ribis is different. Why is the case of ribis different? Because the Amar Kra, the Torah says, I'll just read the pasuk inside. Al tikach me'ito neshech v'sarbis. You should not take extra money. V'yareis me'elokecha. And then the last part of the pasuk reads, V'chei achicha imach. Your brother should be able to live with you. In fact, the drush is on this last little piece of the pasuk that when you take interest, it needs to be a scenario where you can live with your brother. What is the drasha? You need to give back the money so your brother can live with you. However, that's only for the father, because the father and his friend were the ones who had the bad business dealings. But when it comes to the son who inherited the ribis money, so by him, lo mezahir le rachmana. There, the Torah does not obligate him. The Torah does not obligate that child to return the money to its original owner. Amen. So the Gemara then says, he's Yerusha. Yeah, he's gone. According to Rami Bar Chama would say it's like gzela. Like if the gzela has a shinui done to it that's meaningful enough, then you're just done. You don't give back that item. Now, by gzela, you have to give back the value of it. That's true. But here, that's not true. Here, the din of ribis is a din that only applies to the father as it relates to returning it. It's not theft. It's not gezel. So it's not really perfectly comparable, because by the father, he has to give back the ribis, pashut. But that's because the pasuk of V'chei achicha imach. That's not even because of Heshives gzela asher gaza. The guy, it's not gzela. You agreed to the transaction. When I charge you 1,000, when you borrow 1,000, I charge you 1,100. You know what's happening. It's not gzela. We're both avaryanim. I'm not allowed to charge you, and you're not allowed to pay it. So it's not gzela. So here the dinim are different than by gzela. By gzela, you're right. We need a tikkun. But over here, you agreed to give me the extra 100. It was aser, fine, but it was the only way you were going to get the money. So you're like, fine, whatever. I need the money. So here it's a little bit different. Now, yesterday we saw the machlokes of Rami Bar Chama and Rava in regards to our Mishnah, where if a father steals and gives it to his child, he's pater. Over here, we said it was a case of ribis. So the Gemara says about 12 lines down, 10 lines down, man de masni la abraisa. According to this approach of Rav Ada bar Ava, who says that the machlokes of Rami bar Chama and Rav is on this brisa over here, the case of ribis, kol sheken amas nisen, all the more so that it would be true in regards to our Mishnah. And man damasi lo amas nisen, but those who teach this machlokes of Rami bar Chama and Rava in regards to our Mishnah, avala brisa Rami bar Chama ki Rava masnila. It's possible that in our Mishnah, which is a little bit more classical, a regular case of gzela, there we might have our machlokes, but when it comes to ribis, if, according to approach number 1 that we saw yesterday, that the machlokes of Rami bar Chama and Rava is about our Mishnah, then perhaps by the brisa, where there's a unique din by the world of ribis, perhaps Rami bar Chama would have agreed with Rava that it would not be the regular rules of thumb. Could be the case. Don't know. Quarter of the way down, Tan Rabbanan. Hagozel umachil es banav, a person who steals and feeds his children, p'tur and milashalim, we've seen this before, that you're pater from paying back. Hiniach lifneim, what if the father left over that which he stole as a Yerusha to his children? So then it depends. Gedolim, if your child is a gadol, he's above the age of halachic achrais, he's 13 in a day, chayav and l'shalim. There, the child who knows that he inherited gzela, he has to give it back. However, ktanim patur milashalim. But when it comes to children who are underage, they're patur to pay. Now, look at this fascinating line that makes no sense. If the older children said, hey, ein anu yodim cheshbonos shechashav avinu imach. We don't know what our father negotiated with you, Pturin. So says the Gemara, who cares what you know? You see, you're 17, 18 years old, and you have a Yerusha, and you know it's Gezel, but you say, I don't know what your business deal is. Why does that exempt the Gadol? So the Gemara says, Mishum de Amre ein anu yodin Pturin. What does their knowledge have anything to do with it? If, in fact, that we can show one way or the other that there's gzela, then it needs to be repaid by the gadol. Who cares what their feelings are in the matter? I tell this to my children all the time. There are some things where your feelings matter, and there are some things where they don't need to matter. You're making them matter, but they don't need to matter. It isn't emotional to go put on your shoes. You're making it emotional, but it doesn't need to be. You can choose. I don't care what your feelings are, gadol, the child your feelings don't matter. So says the Gemara, why did the Gemara say that the feelings matter if they don't matter? Amar Rava hachi kamar. There's actually an incorrect language here. Really, it's gedolim she'amru. What the gedolim in fact said was not as we had just seen it presented, but rather, we're about a third of the way down, a little bit more. Yodim anu cheshbono shechashav avinu imach velo pashlach gabe velo midi. Oh, that's different. Now they're making a claim against you. They're not saying, I don't know what my father did. They're saying, my father didn't do business with you. That's a whole different ball game. And if the children say that, Turin, because then they're making, then it's one against one. You're coming to my estate and saying, let's say Yosef is the child, your father Yaakov owes me money. And I'll say, that's not true. I have my father's ledger. You're not saying the truth. So chad against chad, then they're patur to pay. The case will escalate to Bezdin, but up until when it's just chad against chad, you are the claimant and I'm the one who has to pay out. So yeah, that is why. That's what we just said. Yeah, that's why the Gedolim don't have. I'm holding the money. You say I owe you money. I say no, I don't, and my father didn't have any business with you. I have to have. It can't be out of thin air. I have to have something to show for it, a ledger or whatever. I have to have some data.
That's the case for the most recognition as well. This where it's pulling up the kid. There's like this. It seems like there's this bubble protecting them, but they're Yorshim. It's not. It seems like it's different.
Well, the case only changed when the kids opened their mouths, right? When the kids said nothing, they had to pay because it was clear. The guy claimed. The children said, "Oh, I hear you. You're right. Here's a check." But when the sons said, "No, my father had nothing to do," lo pashka be'velomidi, then that's a claim against. It's more about hamotzi mechavero. I didn't look into the Rishonim. I'm postulating. It's more about hamotzi mechavero than anything else because who cares that he's a yorish? L'maisa, if he owes the money, he owes the money.
I isn't when they don't know. When they say they don't know, it's not also hamotzi mechavero.
That's a good question.
It should also be, right? Possession is 9 tenths of the law, in other words.
Possession is not, well, yeah, an American, right?
But that's like.
But that's what.
That's what hamotzi mechaber levaraya actually means. It's true. So maybe the concern is that the fact that they that say that they don't know isn't it? It's not modem mixas. It's them being clueless. It's like deer in the headlights a little bit. That's not hamotzi mechavero. Hamotzi mechavero is when there's a claim that says, "Wait, I don't owe you money." So when we're chad against again postulating, when we're chad against chad, then possession is 9/10 of the law. But when the guy's like, "I don't know what you're talking about," he's like, "Your feelings don't matter," because it's a claim against a non-claim. He's just saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." That's not enough. That's insufficient. It's anyways not what the claim was. The Gemara touched it up to say the claim was different, but a good question. Halfway down. Tanya idach. We have another brisa on the same topic. Agozelu ma'achil banav. A person steals and feeds what they stole to their children. P'tur milashalim, just like we saw. However, things take a change in this brisa as it relates to the Yerusha. Hiniach lifnehem ve'achlum. Let's say that the father placed food in front. Not correct. The father gave a Yerusha, right? The father stole grain, and then Yerusha, the kids got it, and they ate all the grain. Ben gdolim, ben ktanim chayavin. In such a case, even ktanim would be chayav, which is a little bit of a problem because ktanim have no das, ktanim have no nothing. They don't have anything. So ask the Gemara, ktanim imachai. They 5 lines before the wide lines. Lo yehei ela de azi kazuke. All they can do is cause damage. Remember the Mishnah from Pebez that pigiyasan ra. Don't mess with children in regards to finances. They will only mess you over. That you will gain nothing. It is not worth it. Don't steal their lunch money. It is not kedai. So what the Gemara is saying over here is we learned this Mishnah on Pebez, and what that means is that this kid it can only hurt you. What do you mean? That means by definition he doesn't have to pay you back. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Papa Hachi Kamar. Really, when this new brisa says that ben gdolim ben ketanim chayavin, that's in a case of hiniach lifnehem ve'adayin lo achlum. That's when that which was stolen is still there. Ben gdolim ben ketanim chayavin. Super interesting case. Okay, very interesting. Here's what happened. I went into your a man went into your backyard and stole 20 pounds of grain. Then the man died, and Yerusha, the katan, the 9-year-old, inherited the bag of grain. The bag of grain is still sitting there. And the din is that he's chayav to return it. He's a katan. So how did we solve the problem? All we said was that the bag still exists. And because there's a kiyum of that which still exists, you can't hide behind the fact that he's a katan. If the bag still exists and the guy knows that it's his bag, he's the nigzal, the katan has to give it back to him. There, the kid ate it. Now the bag is gone.
No. First case, the case of the interest.
Oh.
Say a bag of interest and a bag of principal. Why is that case different?
I mean, probably not what happened.
It's don't listen to me. You need to read. You need to read between the lines. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it was like that. Who does that?
You said it's very organized.
Very organized. A very organized banker.
Condition, frankly.
It is. It's a condition. I know. It's a problem. It's a problem. I'm working on it. But in the meantime, only listen to half the things I say.
Huh?
So therefore. By the way, I don't know if you can compare the cases anyways, because it's ribis, and ribis is a chiddush, like we saw, like the Gemara earlier, but it's a fair question. Okay. Amar Rava, 2 lines before the wide lines. We've been talking about theft. What about the following? Hiniach lehem avian para she'ula. The father didn't do anything wrong this time. He borrows a cow, and then the father dies, and therefore, b'Yerusha, the she'ela of the para goes down to the next generation. So Yaakov had a cow. Yaakov died. His son Yosef ended up taking over the cow. So mishtamshin ba kol yemei she'ela sa. As long as the she'ela, the borrowing, is in place, the halacha is that the child is allowed to use it. The terms and conditions still apply, with one exception. That if the animal dies under normal circumstances, what we call mesa machmas malacha, then ein chayavin be'onse, that the children, the yorshim, are not obligated if an animal dies be'ones. Whereas the shoel is obligated for onsin, the yoresh of the she'ela is not chayiv and onsin. It's a chiddush. Kisvurin, what if the children thought that the para actually belonged to their father? Let's say the dad wasn't a little OCD and the dad did not put a little thing around the person's neck that said this is borrowed from so-and-so, return to this address on this date at this time. But Kisfurim, the Yorshim thought Shalavim he, that Betsy the cow belonged to the father, and then they got hungry. Utvachuha ve'achlua, shechted and ate the animal. Mishalman dmei basar bizol. Then they have to pay a lower market cost for this animal. A very interesting mathematical Rashi that we're not going to read, but basically, the children are obligated to pay 2/3 of the cost of the animal, so less $1,000 animal. So they pay $667 to the original owners for that which they consumed. Actually, financially, not a bad deal. That's 7 cents, 70 cents on the dollar for a cow. That's how Brandis is going to open. I'm telling you, we should his Ben Pakuo. That's you've missed a lot of Ben Pakuo Daf, and we're going to name your restaurant. What? Says the Gemara. This is the last part of the brisa from Rava. So we had said by para she'ula that they can use it, and if the animal dies, they're completely pater. Then we said if they thought it was the father's, then they have to pay. Then the last part of the brisa, we don't know if it's referring to the first case or the second case. And the Gemara says, that if in fact the father had left over that which was a lien, something connected to karka, then chayavin l'shalim. But we don't know what he's talking about. Was he talking about the she'ela in the first case, where therefore, even though it says pater in the first case, but if it was connected to karka, then they have to pay? Or no, were we talking about the second case where kisurim shelavim, where you only have to pay 2/3, but maybe what this means is you have to pay whole. We don't know. So it says the Gemara, Ika de masni la aresha. Some say that the last part of the brisa was about the resha. Ika de masni la asefa. Man de masni la aresha kol sheken asefa. The one who says that the third clause of the brisa, which is on the second wide line, was talking about the first case, the case of Mesa Ein Chayavin Ba'onza, he would definitely agree to the Seifa, Kol Shekena Seifa, and this approach would be Upliga de Rav Papa. We haven't learned about Rav Papa yet, but we will soon. And this approach would argue with Rav Papa. But Man Damasni Lo Seifa, those who learned that the final clause of the Brisa is speaking about the second case, the case of Kisvurim Shalavin, Aval Reshalo. He would not say that Vahainu did Rav Papa. Rav Papa would agree with this latter approach. What is going on with this Rav Papa thing? Says the Gemara, 8 lines from the bottom, the Amar Rav Papa as follows. Haisapara genuvalo. V'tavcha b'Shabbos. Let's say that you had an animal that was already stolen. I stole it on Friday before Shabbos. On Shabbos, I take my shchita knife, I'm not feeling very frum, and I shech the animal. Chayev. You're obligated to pay dalid vehei, which is super weird because we have a din called kamle b'derabamine. And when one does a shchita, the larger consequence is definitely worse than dalid v'hei. Skila is pretty bad. So what's the deal? Why is it that we would not employ the principle of kamle b'derabamine? Says the Gemara, a chiddush. This is a Rav Papa chiddush. Shekvar chayev bigneva kodem shiyavo lidei Isser Shabbos. Go ahead and try and explain this line to me. You stole the item on Friday. And since you stole the item on Friday, then when you shecht it on Shabbos, there's no kamle b'derabamine. That's what the Gemara means. You have an answer? I don't know.
In Lumdus, it tells you that Daled Pay
Yes.
are an extension.
Yes.
Of the Geneva, and
I think
that's
so.
its own-
I think so. I think so. Meaning there's no dalid v'hei without Geneva. Because there's no dalid v'hei without Geneva, then when you do your shchita on Shabbos morning, the dalid v'hei is theft, right? This level of theft has now increased. So there's a lot of ways to say it in Lumdus. Either that the dalid v'hei is an extension of, like you were saying. There's another Lumdus, which is that Gzela level 1 is Kefel. But the Gzela level 2, you've now kicked things up a notch, is a new level of Gzela. But it's all Gzela. And therefore it's Gzela. Yes, you shechted, but it's Gzela, and therefore there's no kamle b'derabamine. Huge chiddush in Lumdus. Huge chiddush in Lumdus. Hayasapara, let's continue his next in. Hayasapara she'ulalo. Let's say it was a borrowed animal, utavcha b'Shabbos. However, if I borrowed an animal on Friday, and then I shechted the animal on Shabbos, then you're pater. Why? She'isr Shabbos v'isr gneva b'in ke'echad. The moment of gneva is simultaneous with the shchita. Masha Ein Kain, the moment of Geneva, in the case of actual, not the case of Sheila, but the Kefel and Dalad Behekes, that Geneva started before chops. Really fascinating. This requires a lot of thinking, but there's a lot of, so it's juicy. There's like a good, it's a good lumdus. Okay, this brings us to the next brisa. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, 5-6 lines from the bottom of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. The pasuk says, "V'heshiv esak zela asher gazal." We know that we have a mitzvah saseh shel Torah to return that which we stole. A classic case of lav hanitak leaseh. Says the Gemara, okay, "V'heshiv esak zela asher gazal." Return the stolen that you stole. So says the Gemara, "Matam lomar asher gazal." We're so used to the pasuk that we don't even think about it. It's thank God, some psukim, most are not, but some psukim are shogor b'fiv. So v'heshiv esak zela asher gazal. Return the stolen that you stole. It really is pretty redundant. So asks the Gemara, Ma talmud lomar asher gazal. Says the Gemara, Yachzir ke'ein shegazal, that you have to give it back in just like it was stolen. Mikan amru. Therefore, we say as follows: Hagozil machil esbanav. If I steal grain or whatever, and my children eat it, I'm ptur milashalem. What if a father was hiniach lifnei? A father left over the food that he stole biyerusha, ben gdolim ben ketanim chayavin. Similar to what we saw earlier, that there is that shita that because the food still exists, so ben gdolim ben ketanim, that the food has to be returned. Now Sumchas argues in this brisa, mishum Sumchas amru gdolim chayavin ketanim turim. Now the Gemara tells us a story that connects to this family politics. Brothers-in-law, Bar Chamuha de Rabbi Yirmiyah, the son of the father-in-law of Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah's wife's wife had a brother, basically. Rav Yirmiyah's brother-in-law thought that the house should be his because his father owned the house. Rav Yirmiyah was the son-in-law and thought that he was going to be the Yorish of the father's house. So the brothers-in-law are arguing. It's just written in a cryptic way, but they're really brothers-in-law. And what did the Bar Chamuha do? What did his brother-in-law do? The son of the owner of the house. Tarak Gali, he closed the door. Ba'apei de Rav Yirmiyah. He closed the door in Rav Yirmiyah's face. Rav Yirmiyah knocked on the door and said, "Hey, Shalom Uvracha. By the way, I've come to claim the house." And the kid's like, "Bye-bye." And the door slams in his face and goodbye. So it says the Gemara, Rav Yirmiyah was a frum guy. He went to go ask a shaila. So shaila in ownership. So Asa Lakame de Rav Avin. He went to go ask a shaila to Rabbi Avin. Omar, Rav Avin says, Shelo, hu toveya. This kid's got a better claim than you do. Why? Because his father is the one who owns the house. You're the son-in-law. Obviously, the little kid is probably the owner. He was a katan, actually. Omar le v'ha ma'isina sade. I'm going to be able to bring witnesses. De'achzake be b'chay de'avua. I can show you, says Rav Yirmiyah, that my father-in-law agreed to give me this house. I have witnesses. I have edim. So Omar le, Rav Avin says back to Rav Yirmiyah, V'chi mekablan edim, turning to the top of Kuf Yud Beis Amud Beis, do we accept witnesses? Shelo bifnei baldin. Hare, the father-in-law is dead. You want to try and create a din Torah. You want to bring edim. The baldin isn't here anymore. So now we have the scenario where the original owner of the house is not alive anymore. There's no tzava that clearly states if it goes to his own son, to the Bar Chamua, or to the son-in-law to Rav Yirmiyah. So Rav Avin says, your hands are tied. You have witnesses. Big deal. But the Baldin is not there. Maybe, and this is going to be our discussion for the rest of the Amud pretty much, maybe we should say that you're not able to adjudicate a case when the Balei Adin are not present. That's what the Gemara recommends.
It's all about the cut.
Also true, right?
Yeah, because as you said, his father was dead.
Right, but right. Those are two sides of the same coin. Meaning the fact that the father-in-law is dead and all that's left is the katan is a zero. Right. I actually wrote that. What you just said, I wrote in the side of my Gemara that the brother-in-law was a katan and the father-in-law was not here. Yeah. Okay, says the Gemara, Velo. Oh, really? You're not allowed, says Rav Yirmiyah to Rav Avin. You're not allowed to have a case adjudicated when the Balei Din are not there. Vaktani, bein gdolim, bein ketanim chayavim. We see that there's a katan who's there, and still that case was adjudicated even though the katan was there. Amar le, hare machlokes sumchus b'tzidcha. There's a problem with sumchus. What did sumchus say? So on the bottom of the previous page, sumchus was not such a fan. Sumchus said 3 lines from the bottom, gdolim chayavim, ketanim, peturim. So therefore we say that a katan is not allowed. So therefore Rav Yirmiyah is stuck. Omar, Rav Yirmiyah got a little bit annoyed because the machlokas between Sumchus and the other Shita was a Yachid v'Rabim. So Sumchus says, Rav Yirmiyah says, Amar, Ichpal kule alma, the whole world is doubling down on me, v'koik is Sumchus, le'afguan ledidi, just to make me lose out on the house. Everybody is against me. The whole world is against me. So therefore, you guys are being ridiculous. It's Yachid v'Rabim lacha karabim. Adahachi, while this was going on, the conversation in the base medrash took off. And igalgal milsa, the words traveled. Asa umata lakamid Rabbi Abo. And then the word reached Rabbi Abo. Omar, and Rabbi Abo said to the base medrash who was handling about this case, the brother-in-law versus the son who gets it, Lo shmialachu had Rabbi Yosef bar Chama amar Rav Oshaya. Didn't you hear about this statement of Rav Oshaya? Damar Rav Yosef bar Chama amar Rav Oshaya. Tinok, shetakaf be'avadav. If a tinok, a child, he takes one of the servants that belongs to his father. So this little pisher of a kid takes one of the avadim. I don't know how he got him to walk, but he got him to walk. He brought him in a field. He sat down like toddlers do and said, "This is mine," even though it wasn't his. It was a random field. Ein omrim, we don't say nam tenat sheyagdil. We don't say that the kid gets to stay there until he becomes a gadol. Elamotziin miyado miyad. You're a toddler. Get the heck out of here. What are you doing? You don't get this property. We'll see what happens when you're older. But you're a child and you're in a man's world. Get out of here. You have no das. You're a zero. So that sounds a lot like Sumchus, except for one thing. They actually entertained this child, namely that a katan can play a role. Why? Because what did we say that the katan did is that when he gets older, there's a court case that's scheduled, which means that his role as a katan was the real deal. So therefore, we have the case of the tinok, and that's being compared to our case of Rav Yirmiyah and his brother-in-law about who gets the house. The Gemara says, midami, 10 lines down. How can you compare the two? Hasam, in the case of the child, hu demafkinan mine, delo kaimale achazaka de avua. When the child walked over to that property with an eved, there was nothing going on there. The kid just like walked into the neighbor's yard and said, "It's mine." That's not, there's no precedent for ownership there. But where the son lived in the same house as his father, Nebuch, his father, died, where do Yerushas typically go? To the kid? So the kid has a halachic chazaka that the house should belong to him. Rav Yirmiyah is down and out. Okay, good. Now let's get into this sugya about whether or not we are mekabel edim shelo bifnei baldin. Says the Gemara, Omar Rav Ashi, and potentially Rav Asi. Very big difference in generations. Rav Ashi was a late Amora. Rav Asi was a very early Amora. So the Gemara says, Omar Rav Ashi or Rav Asi, Omar Rav Shabtai, mekablen edim shelo bifnei baldin. Yep, we accept edim, we adjudicate cases, even when the baldin is nowhere to be found. Tahi bar Rav Yochanan, which, by the way, indicates it's probably Rav Asi, because they lived very similar times, both very, very early Amoraim. So, Tahi bar Rav Yochanan, V'chi mekablen edim shelo bifnei baldin. Rav Asi, what are you talking about? Says the Gemara, Kibla mine Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina kagon shahaya chole o edav cholim. The only time when we have a Kabbalah that we accept the testimony when there's shelo bifnei baldin, that's when there's an extenuating circumstance. Somebody is sick, the edim are sick. O shahayu edav mevakshin leilech lemedina sayam. Somebody had a ticket to go out of town. They had a ferry, whatever. They're leaving. The shalchulo, they sent for the guy below. But in that case, yes, in those extenuating circumstances, we say that we're going to adjudicate a case shelo bifnei baldin. That's fine, I understand. But in general, we don't do that. That's what Rav Yochanan pushed against Rav Ashi. Amar Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel. He says, Mikablen edim shelo bifnei bezdin. Shmuel also very early Amora. Another hint that this Rav Ashi should have been Rav Asi. That perhaps Shmuel also says that we are Mikabel edim shelo bifnei baldin, that we accept edim even though not both of the Baalei Adin are present. Amar Mar Ukva ledidi mifra shali minei de Shmuel. I heard Shmuel's exact svara as to why he felt that we're makabel edim shelo bifnei baldin. Kigon de paschu le bedine. They started the case in Bezdin. V'shalchu le v'lo asa. They started the case, and then the guy, they summoned him in the middle of the court case, and the Balei Adin didn't show up. In that case, Shmuel would agree. Aval lo paschule bedina, but if the case didn't start yet, then Matzi Omar le on lebezdin agonal zilna. If the case didn't start yet, then one of the Balei Hadin, when they find out about this, can say, no. I'm not doing this at the CRC. I'm going to the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim. I'm not doing the smaller communities. I want the real deal. So you're allowed to do that, by the way. It's not like in American law. You can't just, when you have a court case in an appellate court, you can't just say, I'm going to the Supreme Court. The case is very rare cases. Only the big, really political complex cases go to the Supreme Court. It doesn't, but here, a Yid has a right to say, I'm going to Sanhedrin. They have the right to say that. Says the Gemara, what you're saying about Shmuel doesn't make sense, that had it started versus had it not started. That's not true, because Yihachi, halfway down on Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, Ki Paschu Leinami, even if they already started their opening remarks, even if they started in the CRC, they started in a local Bezdin, still Matzi Amar Leila Bezdin Agadol Azilna. Still the guy who's a Baldin can say, I don't want to do this here. I want to do this in Eretz Yisrael, in the Sanhedrin. So therefore, what's the case? Amar Ravina, you're right. You go the Nakat Diska Mi Bezdin Hagadol. This is where a diska, which is basically a shtar, it's a letter that came from the Bezdin Agadol, which said, we will not be taking your case. In that case, says Shmuel, as quoted by a Talmud, by Mar Ukva, that's where Shmuel said that we're willing to accept Balei Din. If you started a case already, or even if you didn't start, but we know that the Sanhedrin is not going to take your case, then Shmuel said that that's what we would do. Amar Rav, unlike the case we've just been discussing, which is whether or not we accept Edus, here Amar Rav Mekaimen es hashtar shelo bifnei baldin. This is a throwback. We learned about this in previous Masechtas, of verifying a shtar, just to verify that the shtar is valid. Not accepting Edus, just verifying the shtar. So Rav says that we're Mekaimen es hashtar shelo bifnei baldin. We don't need the Balei Din there. For Rav Yochanan Amar, ein Mekaimen es hashtar shelo bifnei baldin. This is a lower level concern. Nevertheless, we still have a machlokas amoraim about it. As to whether or not we are Mekayim Ishtar, Rav Yochanan seems to be a party line animal. He says the same thing in both cases. I'm not having it. He said, you need the Baldin to be there. Amar lach Rav Sheshis le Rav Yosi bar Abahu. Asbir Allah ta'amei de Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan has a svara as to why the Balei didn't have to be there. Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, 6 lines before the wide lines. Amar Kra v'hu ad bivala v'lo yishmerenu. That if there was damage from an owner and the owner didn't watch the animal, Amra Torah, Yavel Baal Hashor, V'yamod al Shoro. It seems to be a little difficult to extract from the pasuk, from the words, but the Chachamim extract from the words that the Baldin needs to be there. How do we paskin? Amar Rava, Hilchasa, Mekaimen es hashtar shelo bifnei bezdin, ve'afilu omed v'tzoveach. Wow. Not only do we paskin like Rav, that we can verify a document Shelo bifnei Baldin, but even if the Baldin, who's not in Bezdin, is kicking and screaming and sending nasty, it doesn't matter. He loses. He's out. You are allowed to verify a document, even if one of the Balei Adin rejects that, unless that guy's in court. If he's in court, he can have his 15 seconds of fame. But if he's not in court, Bezdin will basically verify in his absence. And V'i Omar, if this guy, let's say Shimon is the one who's upset, Reuven's in court saying this looks verifiable, Bezdin says, yeah, no problem. All of a sudden we hear Shimon screaming outside of the courthouse. So the Gemara says the screaming won't help. But V'i Amar Nikitu li Zimna, I need you to give me a little bit of time, Ad Damaisina Sade, until I can bring witnesses, Umar Ana Le Lishtara, so that I could ruin or undermine the shtar, Naktinan Le. That's fine. It's a stay. There's like legal term for this. Extension, stay of execution was what happened in my head, but we're not killing anybody here. A continuance. There, I knew you had a reason to be here. Thank you very much. I know. A continuance. So then there's a delay of the verification of the document because we need to prove that this is or isn't valid. And then for this guy, if he shows up and brings his proof, great. And then the document can't be verified because he brought witnesses that it's not verifiable. Ilo asa natrinan le bahab. And if he doesn't come on time when he says, then natrinan le bahab. Then we wait bahab. Monday, Thursday, Monday. We've seen this before. Some of the most pleasurable shacharis ever is when you have Bahab, the long tachanun, coupled with some slichos. It's givaldic. Those are the days that I should show up. Little bit of a break.
You can make a couple.
I can make some bank, by the way.
A little faster.
Okay. I gotta schedule them. I have to schedule the induction is really the harder part. It's not scheduling the bris. It's a little bit aggressive on the mobile side. Listen, does come up. There's a big shiur in postgame if like when people say to me like, oh, we're getting an induction on Saturday. So, can you be the go-rame for a bris on Shabbos?
What's induction?
When you induce labor. Lav dafka, it's a lot of, yeah, Pitocin's a common one, yeah. Anyways, I don't know. I'm just saying these are interesting shilas. Okay, let's go. Says the Gemara Bahab. And ilo asa, if the guy never shows up even after Bahab, kasvinan psicha ilave tishin yomin. Then he gets a 90-day type of cherem. Let's see what it looks like. Second of the wide lines. Tlasin kamoi lo nachtina linichse. For the first 30 days, we don't fully verify this document to the point that we can go into his property and take his property. He's trying to go find money and he's trying to procure a loan. The middle 30 days, we're also not going to go into his property and act as though the document has been verified. He didn't yet find a loan and he's trying to figure stuff out. And as well, Basrai, the last 30 days, nami lo nachtina lenichse. So these are days, 61 to 90. To Amar, lokeach gufe katarach bezuze. The buyer who's going to buy from him to give him the cash, he himself is looking for a loan. He's looking for cash. So we just give him some space. Now, lo asa, if after 90 days, so we had a bahab and then we had 90 days, if still this guy is dragging his feet, then we're done. Okay, the patience has run out. The judge is over. Kasvinan adrachta anichse. They write a document that allows you to take anything you want from his property in equal to what you're owed. Done. Now, here are all the Vahani Milis. Vahani Mili, when is this true? To Amar Asina. That's if he says, I'll show up in Bezdin. However, Aval Amar Lo Asina, if he says, I don't plan to come to Bezdin, then forget you, La'alter Kasvinan, then we write this Adrachta right away. Very short, no Bahab, no 90 days, simple. So this assumes, the previous case of the 90 assumed that he said, I'll be there, and then he didn't show up. V'hani mili b'milveh. This is only talking about a loan. However, aval b'pikadon, when it comes to a pikadon, la'alter kasvinan. And v'chi kasvinan, when we write the adrachta that allows the plaintiff to go collect, that's only on mikarkoi. That's only on the property. That's not on metaltalin. Aval metaltale lo. Why not on metaltalin? Because if the item that we're discussing is edible, and then you go through all this property, all this like hoopla and bezdin, and then like the guy ate your gushers, the whole thing is over. For what? So we don't do it. And if the guy says, no, I really did invalidate the star that you validated, but there's nothing left for him to collect. So therefore, we don't write an adrachta that I can go into your property and take that what I think is rightfully mine, unless it's on karka, because if it's metaltalin, I could consume that well before you ever show up. The isle mikarkoi lemalve, if the malve does in fact have properties that function as a lien, then kasvinan, we would even write an adrachta on metaltalin. It says the Gemara, Velohi, we don't paskin that way. We do not write an adrachta on metaltalin. Adrachta metaltalin lo kasvinan, afal gab de isle mikarkoi, even though the metaltalin, like let's say, for example, my car is tied to my house, that if I default on my payments for my car, they can come take my house. Let's say it was structured, that doesn't matter. Still, chayshin and shema tichsif. The concern is that the value of the car, which is the item in discussion, can greatly go down. Like they say, the second you drive a car off the lot, done. Your pricing has gone way down. Same deal. Most cars depreciate in value over time. And another, v'chi kasvinan adrachta, Modi'inan lay. When we write the adrachta, don't forget to tell the guy whose house you're about to walk into and take stuff. You got to let him know. However, the hani mili de mikrab. That's only if he's in the neighborhood. Aval merchak lo, if he's out of town, don't even bother. Go pick up the stuff from the person's house and move on. V'i merchak, if he really is far away, and v'ika krovim, but he has family members who live nearby, so then inami ika shayrisa da'azlev asu hasam, or you live in a place where there is caravans that go back and forth from where you are to the next place. Mashinan le, we would end up waiting in order to inform the owner up to 12 months. Tresar yarche shata da'azlev asi shayrisa. I guess this assumes that this was the upper limit of travel, 6 months each way. That's a long trip. It's a long time. And says the Gemara Kihade Ravina, 9 lines from the bottom. There was a case like this. Shoha le Mar'acha Tresar Yarche Shata. Mar'acha, who we will soon see was a very strong person. He waited 12 months. Wherever he lived, he had to wait 12 months. Says the Gemara, Velohi, you can't learn anything from Ravacha. Hasam inisha lima hava. He was very strong, and he havya mata adrachta liade. Even had he known about the adrachta, you don't mess with Ravacha. And therefore, lo hava efshar la'afu kemine. Your adrachta is adorable. Get off my property, or I'm going to kill you. It's very simple. The adrachta just didn't hold enough weight. That's what was going on with Ravacha. So you can't learn from him. Aval hacha, in a case without a Ravacha type, in a regular case, perhaps we would have said, lo natrinan le, ela ad azal shlicha b'tzlas b'shabsa. Maybe, says the Gemara, we won't wait. Only ad azil shliach betlasa b'shabsa. That's what is that? Tlasa is 3. That's a Tuesday. V'asa be'arba, and then he shows up on a Wednesday b'shabsa. U'lechamsha b'shabsa koi b'dine. And then on Thursday, all the cases adjudicated. That's all you have to wait. Forget about the 12 months. Maybe we don't have to wait that long at all. Amar Ravina, Hai shlucha de Rabbanon. When you have a shliach Bezdin sends someone out. Right? I don't know what the equivalent is in our culture, but a person who is a representative of the government. Mehem ninon le kibetre. He has the halachic status of 2 people, because Bezdin is unique, and because Bezdin is unique, they make this guy kibetre halachically. What are the parameters? Is kibetre for what? For everything? No way. Says the Gemara, v'hani mili l'shamta. This guy is only strong enough to put someone into Shamta, to put someone into Cherem. Aval lepsicha, for the actual writing of the shtar of the Cherem, that's not allowed. Why not? Because when you write the shtar of the Cherem, somebody has to pay the sofer. And the person who has to pay the sofer is the guy in Cherem. And therefore, if this guy, the Shliach Bezdin, who we're trying to say who functions kibei trey, if he does have a sofer write that shtar to put whoever into cherem, kevan de mamono kamechaser le, since he's causing a loss of money to kaboy le lemesav lezuze lesafra, because the person, the subject about whom the cherem was written, has to pay the sofer. Therefore, your beitrei status is very limited. The shliach bezdin is only treated like 2 people as it relates to the verbal shamta of saying that you are now in cherem. But having a sofer write it down is too far. So very, very limited scope in. Amar Ravina Yavinan Zimna, when we talk about the Bezdin sending out a summons, namely when we're going to tell someone that they have to be brought to Bezdin, who is allowed to do that? Says the Gemara, Apuma de Itza, it can be by the mouth of a woman, namely that a woman can say it. Apuma de Shivave, or you can go tell one of the neighbors, by the way, Scotty Shayer's my neighbor. So the Bezdin can say, Shayers, go tell Phil he summoned the Bezdin. To the wife or to that doesn't matter. A woman can do it, it doesn't matter. It's fine. This is only true when the guy was not in the city. However, but if in fact he was in the city, that's worse for trusting the woman or the neighbor. There, why not? Because a woman or a neighbor might argue, de amrinan, top of Kufyid Gimel Amid Aleph, they might argue, Amar lo amrule. We should assume that the neighbor or the woman did not tell the person. For sure, someone from the rabbinical court found him. They don't need me. And it's only true if he doesn't live near and walk by the doorway of the bezdin. Although we also don't trust the woman or the neighbor to do so. They'll argue, who am I? Someone stuck their head out of bezdin and they told them, they don't need me anymore. And as well, this is only true if he's there that day. We're concerned that perhaps they're going to forget. Omar Rava, I think this is the last din of the day, 4 more lines. Hi man de kosav ale psicha. The subject of a psicha, of a shtar, al de lo asi ladina, and it was written because he didn't come to Bezdin. Ad de asi ladina lo mekar inale. We wait until he comes to Bezdin before we tear it up. Al de tzayis ladina, because he didn't listen to Bezdin. Ad de tzayis lo mekar inale. We won't tear up the cherem until he does what he's supposed to do. Velohi, that's not the case. Ki de amar tzaisina karinan le. If he does in fact say that he's willing to listen, then we tear up the cherem. We're going to stop right here at these 2 dots and pick up on Shabbos an hour before Mincha, and we'll pick up at Amar of Chizda. Wishing you all a beautiful night.